My name is Eleanor Vance, and at 35, the idea of inheriting $14 million from my great-uncle felt like a chapter from someone else's life. I was driving home, my heart a hummingbird in my chest, excited to tell my husband, Liam, the life-changing news when my world literally crashed around me. I woke up in the hospital, my body a geography of pain I couldn't map. Hours turned into days, but Liam never showed up. When I finally reached him by phone, his words were colder and sharper than any surgeon's scalpel. Now, as I lay here watching him walk in with his new wife, I never expected her to look at me and scream those words. If you are reading my story now, I hope you'll stay with me. Let me share how my life fell apart and came back together in ways I never could have imagined, and perhaps you'll find a piece of your own story in mine. My relationship with my great-uncle Arthur was a delicate thing, woven with threads of childhood memory and adult distance. He was my grandfather's younger brother, a man who had left our practical, provincial town of Port Blossom to seek his fortune in the world of fine textiles. The family story, whispered at holiday dinners, was that he and my grandfather had a falling out over a loan for Arthur's first overseas venture. My grandfather, a cautious accountant, saw it as a reckless gamble. Arthur saw it as a leap of faith. The leap paid off, but the rift remained, a silent canyon between our branches of the family tree. Despite this, I had a handful of treasured memories of visiting his estate in Willow Creek Valley as a girl. Those visits felt like stepping into a fairy tale. The house smelled of old paper, cedar, and dried lavender. Arthur would lead me to his library, a magnificent two-story room lined with books, and show me his collection of antique maps and illustrated manuscripts. He was a storyteller, his voice a low, gentle rumble as he recounted tales of sourcing silk in Kyoto or wool in the Scottish Highlands. Arthur was a self-made man, a connoisseur of beauty who had built an empire from a single loom and an impeccable eye. His business acumen was the stuff of local legend, but his personal life was a quiet, solitary affair. He never married or had children, pouring all his passion into his work and his collections. What I didn't know then was that he had been quietly following my life from afar. "You have a poet's heart in a pragmatist's world, Eleanor," he told me once, during a rare visit when I was a teenager struggling to choose a college major. "Don't let the world convince you they are mutually exclusive." After I graduated and settled back in Port Blossom, Arthur began sending me postcards from his travels and occasional handwritten letters on thick, creamy stationery. I would respond politely, a little formally, always conscious of the family chasm. His letters were filled with observations about art, architecture, and the changing seasons in the valley. He'd ask about my work, my ambitions, my quiet life. I never realized he was patiently, meticulously rebuilding a bridge. 6 months before the accident, a cousin informed me that Arthur had been diagnosed with a severe congenital heart condition. When I heard the news, something compelled me to drive out to the valley. I found him in a sunlit room at the local hospital, looking fragile against the crisp white sheets, a shadow of the vital man I remembered. But his eyes, a startlingly clear blue, lit up when I walked in. "Eleanor," he said, his voice a soft rasp. "I had a feeling you would come." That one visit turned into weekly ones. We would sit for hours, talking about everything from Rilke's poetry to the ethics of global trade, making up for lost time. He never once mentioned the feud with my grandfather, and I never asked. We had, it seemed, a silent agreement to begin anew. "Life is far too short to carry the weight of other people's grievances, my dear," he told me during one of our last conversations. I learned that lesson far too late. 3 months later, he passed away in his sleep. I mourned him with a depth that surprised me, grieving not just the man he was, but the relationship we could have had. As for Liam, our story began 7 years ago at a tech startup showcase downtown. I was there on assignment for a local business journal, covering the city's burgeoning innovation scene. Liam was on stage, pitching his new app, Synergy, with a passion and charisma that filled the room. He spoke of changing the world, of connecting people, of building a future that was smarter and more efficient. He was magnetic. Technology is just a tool. He told me when I interviewed him afterward. The real magic is in understanding human connection. We started dating, and within a year, we were married in a simple ceremony at the city courthouse. We couldn't afford a big wedding. We were pouring every spare dollar into a startup. Liam was determined to be the next tech visionary, and I believed in his dream with every fiber of my being. I took a stable, well-paying job as a project manager at a marketing firm, Crestview Creative, to provide the financial foundation he needed to pursue his vision. For the first few years, our life was a whirlwind of shared purpose, despite the constant financial pressure. We lived in a small rental apartment, celebrated small victories, and dreamed of the day synergy would take off. Liam would code late into the night, the glow of his monitor illuminating his focused expression, while I planned project timelines for corporate clients. We were a team. But the last 2 years had been different. Synergy failed to secure a second round of funding, and the initial spark of interest fizzled out. The rejections seemed to erode something in Liam. He became withdrawn, prone to long, unexplained absences. When I asked where he'd been, he'd say he was networking or meeting with potential angel investors. Our joint savings account began to shrink as he invested in essential new hardware and server upgrades for projects that remained perpetually in the beta stage. "You just don't understand the pressures of this industry," became his standard reply to any of my gentle inquiries about our finances or his increasing distance. I was in the middle of a budget meeting at work when I received the call from Mr. Alistair Finch, Arthur's solicitor. MS. Eleanor Vance? This is Alistair Finch. I am handling the estate of the late Arthur Vance. Would you be available to come to my office this afternoon? I agreed, assuming Arthur might have left me a favorite book or a small memento. When Mr. Finch slid the will across his polished mahogany desk, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Arthur had left me everything, his entire estate, valued at $14 million, plus the Willow Creek Valley property. He amended his will after you began visiting him, Mr. Finch explained gently. He was deeply moved by your kindness. He said you had reminded him what family was supposed to feel like. Attached to the will was a letter in Arthur's elegant, sloping script. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, then I have embarked on the next great adventure. I have watched you from a distance for years, admiring your quiet strength, your integrity, and your gentle heart. You possess the same fire I once had, but tempered with a wisdom I never did. This money is a tool, my dear, not a destination. Use it to build a life of purpose and joy. Be happy and remember that true wealth is measured not by what you have, but by the love you give. With all my affection. Your Uncle Arthur. I signed the necessary paperwork in a daze. $14 million. It was an impossible sum. We could pay off our debts. Liam could finally launch his next venture without the stress of funding. We could buy a house, start a family, travel. A future that had been a distant dream was suddenly within our grasp. On my way out of the lawyer's office, I stopped at a rare bookstore and bought a first-edition copy of a biography of Alan Turing, one of Liam's heroes. It was an extravagant, symbolic gift for our new beginning. I decided not to tell him over the phone. News like this deserved to be shared face-to-face, over a celebratory dinner. But I couldn't resist calling him just to say I was coming home early with wonderful news. He sounded distracted, the clatter of a keyboard in the background. I'm kind of in the zone right now, Ellie. Trying to debug this new algorithm. This is important, Liam. I'll be home in 30 minutes. Fine, he sighed. Just don't expect me to be too chatty. I'm on the verge of a breakthrough. I hung up, a little deflated by his lack of enthusiasm, but still buzzing with excitement. Once he heard the news, everything would change. Little did I know, that was one of the last normal conversations we would ever have. A soft rain had begun to fall as I turned onto the coastal highway, a fine mist that made the asphalt shimmer like dark silk. I remember the radio was playing a quiet, acoustic song as I rehearsed my speech to Liam. I'd let him unwrap the book, see the inscription, and then I'd tell him that his struggles were over, that our future was secure. I imagined the weight lifting from his shoulders, the return of the optimistic, passionate man I had fallen in love with. I was so lost in this daydream that I barely registered the blur of motion in my peripheral vision. A large delivery truck in the lane to my left hydroplaned on a patch of slick road. Time seemed to warp, stretching and slowing as the truck fishtailed, its heavy trailer swinging directly into my path. I wrenched the steering wheel, a useless, reflexive action. The impact was a brutal, deafening roar of shearing metal. My car spun like a child's toy. The airbag deployed with a violent punch. Through the shattering chaos, I saw the beautifully wrapped book fly from the passenger seat, the corners of the box tearing as it hit the dashboard. My last conscious thought was strangely mundane, a roadside billboard for a local credit union, its slogan reading, "Your future is secure." Then, only darkness. I awoke to the rhythmic, hypnotic beep of a heart monitor and the sterile, chemical scent of a hospital. My body was a landscape of deep, throbbing pain. A simple breath sent a jolt of agony through my ribs. I tried to shift my weight and a wave of nausea washed over me. "Easy now," a calm voice said. "You need to lie still." I blinked, my vision slowly focusing on a woman in pale blue scrubs. Her name tag read Grace, RN. What happened? My voice was a dry, cracked whisper. "You were in a very serious accident on the highway," Grace explained, her touch gentle as she checked my foreline. "You've been unconscious for nearly 2 days." 2 days. The information felt unreal. My husband Liam. Does he know I'm here? Grace's warm expression flickered for a fraction of a second. "We contacted the emergency number in your wallet. We've left several messages, but he hasn't come in yet." The slight hesitation in her voice was more telling than her words. "I'm sure he'll be here soon," she added, though it sounded more like a hope than a certainty. Later that day, Dr. Chin came to catalog my injuries: 3 broken ribs, a severe concussion, a compound fracture in my left leg that now contained a titanium rod, and a constellation of deep bruises and lacerations. I would need weeks of hospitalization, followed by months of intensive physical therapy. "You're incredibly lucky to be alive," he said, his tone clinical but not unkind. "The driver of the truck that hit you didn't survive." Lucky. I didn't feel lucky as I lay trapped in a broken body, unable to reach the one person I needed most. I tried calling Liam's phone over and over, but it went directly to voicemail every time. I sent texts that were marked as delivered, but remained stubbornly unanswered. With each silent, passing hour, a cold knot of anxiety tightened in my chest. Grace became my anchor in that disorienting world of pain and uncertainty. She would check on me even when she wasn't assigned to my floor, bringing me an extra cup of tea or simply sitting with me, her quiet presence a comfort. Still no word, she asked gently on the 3rd day, helping me prop myself up with pillows. I shook my head, wincing. I don't get it. Even if his phone was off, he'd know something was wrong when I didn't come home. On the 4th day, I finally received a text from him. "Heard about the accident. Buried in a breakthrough project. Will visit when I can. No questions. No concern. No, I love you." Just a cold, dismissive message. "That doesn't feel right," Grace murmured, her brow furrowed with concern when I showed it to her. "Do you have a close friend you could call?" I called my best friend, Clara, but she sounded flustered and evasive, making vague excuses about a deadline at work. When I pressed her about Liam, she deflected, promising to visit as soon as things calmed down. By the end of the first week, suspicion had curdled into a certainty that something was terribly wrong. Using Grace's tablet, I logged into my social media accounts. My feeds were quiet, but a quick search brought up Liam's public LinkedIn profile. His status had been updated 2 days ago, celebrating a new partnership and new beginnings at Nexus Innovations. The post included a photo. He was standing beside a sleek, smiling young woman, both of them holding champagne flutes. With a trembling hand, I dialed his number again. This time, he answered. "What?" His voice was sharp, impatient. I could hear music and laughter in the background. "Liam, it's me. I'm in the hospital. I've been here for a week. Where are you?" There was a pause. "Look, Eleanor, I'm in the middle of a very important meeting." More important than your wife being in a hospital bed? Another, longer pause. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted, shedding any pretense of warmth. It was flat, cold, and utterly final. I don't have the time or the resources for a liability, Eleanor. Some of us are moving on with our lives. The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, the words echoing in the silent room. Liability. The man I had supported for 7 years, the man for whom I had just inherited a fortune, had dismissed me as a liability. Grace found me an hour later, my body shaking with silent, racking sobs. She didn't say a word, just took the phone from my hand, administered a sedative the doctor had ordered for pain, and sat with me until the medication pulled me under, dulling the sharp edges of both physical and emotional agony. But as I drifted into a hazy sleep, one thought circled in my mind: something was profoundly, monstrously wrong. The days that followed Liam's call were a descent into a gray, featureless fog. The physical pain was a constant, but it was the emotional wreckage that threatened to drown me. 7 years. A marriage, a partnership, a shared life all erased with a few callous words. Grace, seeing my spiraling depression, arranged for me to speak with Dr. Anya Sharma, the hospital's staff psychologist. She was a small woman with perceptive, dark eyes and a quiet, steady presence. She didn't offer saccharine reassurances. What you're experiencing is a profound, multi-layered trauma, she explained during our first session. The physical trauma of the accident, the emotional trauma of betrayal, and the psychological shock of abandonment. It's natural to feel completely unmoored. Did he know? I asked, the question floating in the quiet room. About the money? What money? Dr. Sharma asked, her pen hovering over her notepad. I hadn't told anyone at the hospital about the inheritance. In the face of my injuries and Liam's abandonment, it had seemed irrelevant. But now it felt like the missing piece of the puzzle. I inherited $14 million. The day of the accident. I was on my way home to tell him. Dr. Sharma's eyebrows rose slightly. Well, she said softly. That certainly changes the calculus. 2 days later, Clara finally came to visit. She entered my room like a skittish deer, clutching a bouquet of wilting daisies and avoiding my gaze. You look awful, she stammered, then winced. I'm sorry, that came out wrong. Why have you been avoiding me, Clara? I asked, my voice flat. The pain medication had stripped away my capacity for social pleasantries. She sank into the visitor's chair, the flowers forgotten in her lap. I didn't know what to say, Ellie. It's all so twisted. Tell me what's happening with Liam. She twisted the silver ring on her finger. He's with someone. A woman named Sophie. The words landed like a physical blow. What do you mean, with someone? We're married. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He told everyone you didn't survive the accident, Ellie. He held AA memorial gathering at your apartment last week. I couldn't go. The sterile hospital room seemed to tilt. My husband had told our friends I was dead. While I was lying here, fighting to recover, he had mourned me. Clara nodded miserably, tears welling in her eyes. I only found out you were alive when Grace called me yesterday from the hospital. Liam blocked your number on my phone, deleted your social media profiles. He changed the locks on the apartment. Show me, I demanded, a cold fury beginning to replace the grief. Show me this woman. Reluctantly, Clara pulled out her phone and opened a social media app. There was Liam, his arm draped possessively around a young woman with dark, wavy hair and a familiar smile. They were clinking glasses, the caption reading, "To New Horizons." There was something about her face, an echo in the shape of her eyes and the curve of her mouth, that felt uncannily familiar. Her name is Sophie Dubois, Clara explained. She's some kind of junior partner at a venture capital firm. They apparently met 3 months ago. 3 months. While I was making weekly visits to my dying uncle, Liam was starting a new life with another woman. A wave of nausea, sharper than any from my injuries, rolled through me. There's more, Clara added, her voice barely audible. People are saying they got married. Last weekend. At the courthouse. Married. My husband had declared me dead, mourned me, and married another woman, all within 10 days of my accident. The scale of the betrayal was so vast, so monstrous, it was almost incomprehensible. Grace, who had been quietly tidying up nearby, stepped in when she saw my heart rate on the monitor begin to climb alarmingly. "I think that's enough for one day," she said, gently but firmly guiding Clara toward the door. "I'm so sorry, Ellie," Clara whispered as she left. "I should have told you." After she was gone, Grace sat with me, her presence a silent, steadying force as I tried to absorb the impossible truth. "You need a lawyer," she said finally. "This isn't just a messy divorce, Eleanor. This is fraud." She was right. With Grace's help, I called Mr. Finch the next morning. "Eleanor, my dear, I was about to contact the authorities to file a missing persons report," the solicitor said, his voice etched with concern. "I've had some troubling developments here." "Let me guess," I said, my voice thick with bitterness. "My husband has been inquiring about my inheritance." "More than inquiring. He came to my office last week, claiming to be your grieving widower and next of kin. He had marriage certificates and what appeared to be an official death certificate, though it didn't hold up to scrutiny. He's trying to steal my money," I said, the ugly pieces locking into place. "It appears so." "And he wasn't alone. He brought a young woman with him, whom he introduced as your long-lost sister, claiming she would have a right to a portion of the estate as well." "I don't have a sister," I said automatically, and then I froze. The familiar face. The slight resemblance. The timing of her appearance, just as Arthur's health was failing. What was her name? Sophie Dubois. My mind raced, connecting disparate points of light into a horrifying constellation. "Mr. Finch," I said, my voice now cold and clear. "I need you to investigate this woman. And I need you to be here, at the hospital, tomorrow afternoon. I think my husband is about to make his next move, and I intend to be ready." That night, sleep was impossible. My mind was a whirlwind, piecing together the fragments of this grotesque puzzle. How could Liam have known about the inheritance before I had the chance to tell him? Why choose a woman who bore a passing resemblance to me? And why did her face stir something deeper than just a sense of familiarity? By morning, a sickening theory had begun to form, one so outlandish I could barely allow myself to consider it. I asked Grace to help me set up a small, discreet camera on the shelf opposite my bed, ostensibly for my own security. Then, using Clara's phone, I sent a text to Liam. "I know about the inheritance. Ellie is awake and her memory is coming back. You need to fix this before she talks to the police." The reply came in under a minute. "We'll handle it this afternoon." Delete this message now. They were coming. And I would finally get my answers. I spent the morning preparing for the confrontation. Grace helped me arrange my pillows, so I was sitting up, making me look a little more fragile than I felt. Dr. Sharma coached me through a series of breathing exercises to maintain my composure. "Remember, Eleanor, you are not the victim in this room," she told me. "You are the one who holds the truth. That is your power." Mr. Finch arrived at noon, his leather briefcase in hand. He positioned himself in a chair near the window, out of the immediate line of sight from the door. The tiny camera lens was a silent, unblinking eye. "Are you certain you wish to proceed this way?" Mr. Finch asked, his expression worried. "We could let the authorities handle this." "I need to see his face when he lies to mine," I said. "I need to understand why." At precisely 2 o'clock, a soft knock sounded at my door. My heart monitor beeped a little faster, betraying my feigned calm. Grace gave my hand a reassuring squeeze before moving to stand near the ensuite bathroom. Liam entered first. He was wearing a tailored gray suit I'd never seen before, and an expensive-looking watch gleamed on his wrist. The transformation from a perpetually stressed startup founder to a man of wealth and substance was jarring. His expression upon seeing me awake was not one of relief or shock, but of pure, unadulterated annoyance, which he quickly masked with a performance of concern. "Eleanor," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "You're awake. My God, we've been so worried." "We?" I asked, my own voice surprisingly steady. He gestured toward the doorway. The young woman, Sophie, stepped into the room, hovering hesitantly behind him. "You remember Sophie, don't you?" he said smoothly. "Your cousin's daughter, from Montreal?" I said nothing, my eyes fixed on him as he moved closer to the bed, his confidence growing. He had always been a performer, a master of the pitch. Today, his product was himself, the devoted husband. "The doctors warned us your memory might be fragmented," he continued, his tone solicitous. "So much has happened while you've been unconscious." "Like you telling everyone I was dead?" I asked softly. He didn't miss a beat. "A terrible misunderstanding. The initial prognosis was grim, darling. I was out of my mind with grief. People misinterpreted things." "And the wedding?" His eyes narrowed for a split second. "You've been listening to gossip. That's not good for your recovery. What's important now is getting you well and taking care of the administrative side of things." He pulled a sheaf of papers from his suit pocket. "The doctors feel you won't be in a position to manage your own affairs for some time. These are just some simple power of attorney forms, authorizing me to handle things on your behalf while you rest." The audacity of it was almost breathtaking. If I were still groggy from medication, still lost in a fog of confusion and grief, I might have signed them. But I could see the greed behind his eyes, the impatience in the set of his jaw. "You mean Arthur's $14 million, I stated, not as a question. His mask of concern flickered. "You remember that?" "Yes, of course. A wonderful gift, but a heavy burden. The stress of managing such a complex estate could set your recovery back months." "How considerate of you." He smiled, mistaking my calm for acquiescence. "I've always wanted what's best for you, Ellie. Is that why you changed the locks on our apartment?" His smile vanished. "You're confused. It's the concussion, the medication." "Perhaps this will refresh your memory, mister," Finch said, rising from his chair. Liam spun around, his face a mask of shock. "Who the hell are you?" "Alistair Finch, Mrs. Vance's solicitor. And you must be the husband who attempted to defraud my client by presenting a forged death certificate." "Mr." Finch placed his tablet on my overbed table and played the security footage from his office, Liam and Sophie, standing before his desk, making their fraudulent claim. "That's enough." Liam lunged for the tablet. "I wouldn't do that," Grace said, stepping forward. "Hospital security is just outside the door." Sophie, who had been frozen near the doorway, finally moved forward, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. As she neared the bed, I saw her face clearly for the first time. The resemblance was more than passing, it was structural. The same high cheekbones, the same shape of the eyes. But it was something else, something deep in my bones, that recognized her. She stared at me, her own expression shifting from nervous curiosity to dawning, horrified recognition. The color drained from her face. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's you. You're my mother." The room fell into a deafening silence. "Shut up, Sophie," Liam hissed, grabbing her arm. "Stick to the plan." But she was mesmerized, her eyes locked on mine. With a shaking hand, she reached into her handbag and pulled out a faded, creased photograph. "I've been looking for you my whole life," she said, her voice breaking as she held the photo out to me. It showed a scared-looking teenage girl with my eyes, holding a newborn baby wrapped in a hospital blanket. It was a photograph I hadn't seen in 17 years. A photograph I thought I had destroyed. As I stared at the tangible proof of my life's most profound secret, the world seemed to dissolve around me. The heart monitor began to beep in a frantic, panicked rhythm as the past and present collided with the force of a head-on crash. My hand trembled as I took the photograph from Sophie. The girl in the picture was so young, her face puffy from crying, her arms holding the tiny, swaddled infant with a desperate tenderness. She knew even then that it would be their only moment together. "Where did you get this?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "It was with my adoption papers," Sophie replied, her own voice thick with emotion. "It was the only thing I had of my birth mother. I've carried it with me every single day." Liam tried to intervene, his voice sharp with panic. This is insane. She's obviously unstable, trying to manipulate you. Be quiet, Liam, I said, and the authority in my voice was so new, so unfamiliar, it startled us all. For once in your life, just stop talking. I looked back at Sophie, my daughter. She had my father's jawline and my eyes. How had I not seen it instantly? Perhaps because for 17 years, I had trained myself not to look, to bury the memory of the baby I'd held for only an hour. I was 18, I began, my voice gaining strength with every word. A senior in high school with a scholarship to college. The boy he didn't want to be a father. My parents were terrified of the scandal in our small town. Sophie sat on the edge of my bed, her gaze unwavering. They sent me away to live with a great-aunt in another state. After you were born, they arranged a closed adoption through a private agency. They let me hold you once. Someone took this picture. I never knew they gave you a copy. My parents, me adoptive parents, said it was the only thing that came with me, Sophie explained. They're wonderful people. They never hid my story from me. When I turned 18, they gave me my file and supported my decision to search. And how did you find Liam, Mr. Finch asked, his solicitor's mind piecing together the conspiracy. Sophie glanced at Liam, who stood by the window, rigid with fury. I didn't find him. He found me, she admitted. He approached me about 3 months ago. He'd used a private investigator. He told me he knew my birth mother. The memory box. The words formed in my mind before I spoke them aloud. You found the box, I said, looking directly at Liam. He said nothing, but his stony expression was all the confirmation I needed. A small, cedar box where I kept the few things I had from that time, a hospital bracelet, a tiny knitted cap, and my copy of the photograph. I had hidden it in the back of our closet, or so I had thought. He told me you had been looking for me, too, Sophie continued, her voice choked with shame. That you were wealthy but estranged from your family and wanted to reconnect, but that you were afraid of being rejected. And the marriage? I asked, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. He said it would make you happy, she whispered. To see me settled with someone you knew and trusted. It all happened so fast. It seemed romantic. And then I had my accident, I finished for her. And suddenly, I was worth more to him dead. Liam finally exploded. This is ridiculous. You can't prove any of this. It's all circumstantial, emotional nonsense. Mr. Finch cleared his throat. On the contrary, Mr. Vance. We have your recorded attempts to access your wife's accounts, the presentation of a forged death certificate, and now a room full of witnesses to your confession of a conspiracy to commit fraud. Not to mention the charge of bigamy, as your marriage to Eleanor was never legally dissolved. But why? Grace interjected, her brow furrowed. Why not just stay married to Eleanor and enjoy the money? I looked at Liam then, really saw him for the first time, stripped of all artifice. Because it was never about love. I was a means to an end, a stable income. $14 million required a more direct, more ruthless strategy. Arthur's will contain a specific clause, Mr. Finch explained. In the event of Eleanor's death without any known issue, a significant portion of the estate would be bequeathed to a charitable trust. But with a direct descendant. The entire inheritance would pass to the next of kin, I finished. And as Sophie's husband, Liam would have control of it all. Sophie stood up abruptly, moving away from Liam as if he were radioactive. You used me. All of it was a lie. Don't be so dramatic, Sophie, Liam sneered, his true, venomous self finally on full display. It was a business arrangement. You got to find your mother. I secured our future. By declaring me dead and marrying my daughter? I asked, the sheer depravity of it still staggering. You can't prove I had anything to do with the accident, he spat. We don't have to, I said quietly. You've already shown everyone exactly who you are. I turned my gaze to Sophie, whose entire world had been detonated in the span of 10 minutes. I am so sorry you were caught in the middle of his poison. She wiped a tear from her cheek. I spent my whole life dreaming of this moment. Just not like this. Liam made a sudden move for the door. I'm leaving. This is absurd. I would advise against that, Mr. Finch said calmly. As Grace mentioned, hospital security is waiting for you. I took the liberty of contacting the Port Blossom Police Department an hour ago. As if on cue, two uniformed security officers appeared in the doorway. Liam looked around the room, a cornered animal searching for an escape route. Ellie, he tried one last time, his voice shifting back to the soft, persuasive tone I once loved. We can fix this. Think of our history. Think of everything we had. That's exactly what I'm thinking about, I replied. Officers, this is the man. As they escorted a protesting Liam from the room, Sophie and I were left alone in the sudden, echoing silence. 17 years of separation and a universe of lies stretched between us. I never stopped thinking about you, I said, the words I had held inside for nearly 2 decades finally finding their way out. Not for a single day. The weeks after Liam's arrest were a surreal montage of legal briefings, police interviews, and long, quiet conversations. Mr. Finch was a whirlwind of efficiency, meticulously untangling the web of deceit Liam had woven. He discovered forged emails, fabricated financial statements, a whole digital history created to suggest I had been complicit in his plans. How much trouble is he in? I asked during one of Mr. Finch's visits to my hospital room. My question wasn't born of concern, but of a need for closure. Fraud, forgery, attempted grand larceny, bigamy, he listed off. And the district attorney is exploring conspiracy charges. He's facing a substantial prison sentence. The betrayal felt like a phantom limb, an ache for a marriage that had never truly existed. I had been in love with a character, a carefully constructed role Liam had played to perfection. The question of his marriage to Sophie was resolved quickly. It will be annulled, Mr. Finch assured me. As your marriage was never dissolved, his subsequent one is legally void from the outset. Sophie was a constant presence at my bedside. Our first few days together were tender and awkward, navigating the minefield of our shared history. We were mother and daughter, but also strangers, learning the rhythms of each other's speech, the stories behind our scars. Tell me about them, I asked one afternoon. Your parents. The ones who raised you. Sophie's face softened. They're the best people I know. My dad teaches biology at the local high school, and my mom's a librarian. They always made sure I knew I was wanted. I'm so glad, I said, my voice thick with emotion. That's all I ever wanted for you. They want to meet you, she said cautiously. When you're ready. They always spoke of you with kindness. They told me you were young, and that you made the hardest choice a mother could make, out of love. Her words were a balm on a wound I hadn't realized was still open. For 17 years, I had carried the weight of my decision, a secret shame I thought I would take to my grave. Her freely offered understanding felt like absolution. For the first time since the accident, I wept not for Liam, not for the life I'd lost, but in pure, unadulterated relief, releasing decades of stored-up grief. While my emotional healing began its slow, tentative journey, my physical recovery was a matter of brute force and repetition. Physical therapy sessions were agonizing, a daily battle against atrophied muscles and searing nerve pain. You're making excellent progress, Dr. Chin told me, reviewing my chart. You have a remarkable will to heal. I had a reason to. I had a daughter to get to know. Mr. Finch visited again to discuss the estate. Given the revelation of Sophie's existence, he said gently, we need to discuss your intentions. It wasn't a difficult decision. Arthur left the money to me because he didn't know he had a great niece. If he had known, he would have provided for her. I want to split the inheritance with her. 50-50. Ellie, no, Sophie protested immediately when I told her. That's your money. I didn't come looking for you for that. I know, I said, taking her hand. But you're my family. And I have 17 years of missed birthdays to make up for. As my discharge from the hospital neared, the practicalities of my new life began to emerge. I couldn't go back to the apartment, a place now tainted with memories of betrayal. You can stay with me, Sophie offered. My apartment is small, but it's accessible. As grateful as I was, another idea had been taking root in my mind, an idea that felt like coming home. What about Arthur's house? I asked. The estate in Willow Creek Valley. The place of my happiest childhood memories. It was sitting empty, waiting. It offered a quiet place to heal, a sanctuary away from the city and its ghosts. "It's beautiful there," Sophie said, a small smile playing on her lips. A good place for a new beginning. She had recently quit her job at the venture capital firm, a place now inextricably linked with Liam's manipulation. When I asked what she wanted to do next, her answer surprised me. "I've been thinking about going back to school," she said. "To study psychology. I want to help other adoptees and birth parents navigate the complexities of reunion." The rightness of it settled over me, a quiet sense of pieces falling into place. "The house has plenty of room," I said. "You could stay with me while you figure things out." Her hopeful expression was all the answer I needed. Out of the wreckage of one life, a new one was beginning to grow. 6 weeks after the crash, I left the hospital. Saying goodbye to Grace felt like leaving a part of my family behind. "You are one of the strongest women I've ever met," she told me, her hug warm and fierce. "Don't you ever forget that." The drive to Willow Creek Valley was a peaceful transition. The urban landscape gave way to rolling green hills and ancient oak trees. A light spring rain was falling, washing the world clean. The house was just as I remembered it, a grand but welcoming Victorian, with a wide wraparound porch and windows that looked out over the valley. Mr. Finch had arranged for a few modifications to accommodate my wheelchair and crutches, making the ground floor my temporary sanctuary. Those first weeks were a delicate dance of discovery. Sophie and I were two people bound by blood, but separated by time, cautiously learning the small, intimate details of each other's lives. I learned she was a morning person who hummed off-key while she made coffee. She learned I was a night owl who found comfort in the quiet of the late hours. We were slowly, carefully, building a bridge across 17 years of silence. My physical therapy continued, the sharp pains gradually dulling into a persistent ache. Each milestone, from the wheelchair to a walker, from the walker to a cane, was a victory we celebrated together. The emotional healing was more complex. Dr. Sharma continued our sessions via video call, helping me navigate not only the trauma of Liam's betrayal, but the overwhelming joy and complexity of my reunion with Sophie. One evening, 3 months after we moved to the estate, Sophie asked me to meet her parents. The anxiety was immediate and intense. But Mark and Diana Laurent were everything Sophie had described, kind, grounded, and generous of spirit. We always knew this day might come, Diana told me over tea, her eyes warm and sincere. "We just saw ourselves as her guardians, keeping her safe for you." Their lack of resentment, their open-hearted welcome, was a gift beyond measure. Our strange, cobbled-together family was expanding. Liam was eventually sentenced to 8 years in prison for fraud, bigamy, and a host of related charges. I felt no triumph, only a quiet sense of closure. The chapter was over. As the seasons turned, the estate came back to life. Sophie and I planted a garden, our hands in the rich soil, coaxing new life from the dormant ground. On the advice of Mr. Finch, we established a charitable foundation in Arthur's name, dedicated to providing resources for young mothers and ethical adoption services. It felt like the perfect way to honor his legacy, to create purpose from my own past. Sophie enrolled in university that fall, her passion for her new field a joy to watch. I found my way back to an old love of my own, writing. I began to write my story, not as a memoir, but as a novel, transforming the raw material of my pain into a narrative of resilience and hope. 1 year to the day after the accident, we hosted a small gathering at the estate. Grace was there, and Mr. Finch and Clara. Mark and Diana came, and Dr. Sharma. It was a collection of the people who had walked with me through the darkest valley and into the light. Looking at their faces, I was struck by the strange and beautiful alchemy of life. Later that evening, after everyone had gone, Sophie and I sat on the porch steps, watching the first stars appear in the twilight sky. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "All the pain you went through because of Liam?" I thought for a long moment, the cool night air on my face. Regret would mean wishing for a different path, I said. And I wouldn't trade the path that led me back to you for anything. Liam's betrayal had been a crucible. It burned away the life I thought I had, the person I thought I was, and left behind something stronger, something more authentic. The money had been a catalyst, revealing the truth of his character and, in a strange twist of fate, giving me the freedom to build a new life from the ashes. I had lost a husband, but I had gained a daughter. I had lost my illusions, but I had found my truth. What are you thinking about? Sophie asked, her head resting on my shoulder. I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. I'm thinking that sometimes you have to survive the crash to finally find your way home. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to something positive in your life? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and unexpected second chances. Share this with someone who might need a reminder that even our darkest moments can lead to dawn. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes our greatest strength emerges from our most vulnerable moments.